Yo, what's going on, guys? Spartan here. Guys, we've got an important video, something very interesting, and carnivore dieters, they're not going to be telling you about this, okay? So let's touch on this, guys. You know, I'm a huge advocate, huge proponent of the carnivore diet, or even meat and fruit, you know, pretty much anything that's animal-based. You know, I'm a huge supporter of that. However, guys, I'm going to tell you guys today, you know, because I don't want to say carnivore diet is turning into a religion like veganism, but it a little bit is, where, you know, people tell you there's nothing wrong with, there's no cons to the carnivore diet. It's all sunshine and rainbows. And, you know, there's a lot of sunshine and rainbows, but there's one big problem with the carnivore diet that I have found personally for myself. And it's something that should be addressed and talked about, okay? You know, if you're gonna, I love the carnivore diet, by the way, but if you're gonna stick to the carnivore diet, or, you know, pretty much any diet, you need to be aware and open and honest with the issues, okay? And, you know, whether it's Paul Saladino or any of these other guys that have, you know, transitioned away from the carnivore diet, I don't hear them talking about this, so we're gonna talk about this, okay? So this is what you need to know. This is the big issue with the carnivore diet, and this is the one big con with it. Again, being real open and honest with you. And the last thing I'm going to say is, again, I love the carnivore diet. It's a great diet, you know, for health and performance. But what's this one big issue? Here's the issue. With the carnivore diet, by removing carbohydrates basically completely, okay, doing, you know, just pure carnivore, whether that's, you know, meat only or meat and eggs, or even if you're doing carnivore plus, I'll call it, meat, eggs, cheese, you know, low carb animal products. The big issue with the carnivore diet is what? Is oxygen. It comes down to oxygen. And again, you're not going to hear this from any other carnivore dieters or people that switched away. I have not heard anybody talk about this, so listen up. The big issue with the carnivore diet is oxygen. What do I mean by that? Let me just read this to you guys real quick, and then I'm going to tell you what I have found out. Or, you know, let's start with the experiences first, okay? When I switched from, you know, I used to be Mr. High Carb bodybuilder, okay? When I switched from high carb to carnivore, right? I got adapted. It took me a little bit to get adapted, and then I felt great on the carnivore diet. Increased strength, increased performance, increased stamina, mental clarity, slept so much better. All the benefits you hear people ranting and raving about, you know, after the adaptation period. You know, you build up the enzymes, your metabolism switches over, and also your mitochondria inside your cells will hypertrophy to handle burning tons of fat at one time, right? So all this is true. And also, guys, it's true too that if we compare carbohydrates to fat, glucose to fat, which one is a better fuel source? Fat all day, every day is a better fuel source. It's more powerful. But the big problem with fat that you don't get with carbohydrates is that what? It requires more oxygen to metabolize. It takes your body more oxygen to metabolize fat. Okay, yeah, it's more powerful. It's a more powerful, stronger, just overall better fuel source, but it takes more oxygen. Now, this leads me into what I first noticed, okay, before I did any research, any digging, any science, before I did any science on this, what I noticed was going back and forth, and I didn't notice this until first I got carnivore adapted, right? And then when I would switch back and forth, okay, between carbohydrate metabolism to carnivore, which is what fat metabolism, you know, primarily, right? Even though your body still creates, you know, some amount of glucose to support the tissues that cannot run on ketones or fat metabolism. But having said that, going back and forth after I was adapted to both, switching from carnivore to back to carb, carnivore to carb, carnivore to carb, one big thing I've noticed, and this is the take-home message, was that the huge thing I noticed was that when I was doing carnivore, I was just as strong, if not stronger, typically a little bit stronger, okay? But so stronger, I could train just as hard or harder, typically harder. Okay, I talk about the boost I got, but I noticed there's one issue, one big issue with the carnivore diet before I did any research, which was that I got more winded if I squat to failure. Let's say I put 405 and I squat, you know, 15, 16, 17 reps, if I squat to failure, if I do bench press to absolute failure, whatever muscle, I'm a bigger guy, whatever I do to absolute failure, I noticed that after my set, I needed longer to catch my breath, needed longer to recover. I was more winded, easier running on carnivore versus carbohydrates. Now, especially going back and forth, I didn't understand this. So what I did was I researched, I did the science on this, and I pulled up the difference between glucose and fat metabolism in the human body. And this is what you found, all right? I'm just going to read a little bit of this to you. Therefore, for each mole of oxygen consumed, O2, there is a 53.7 higher energy production in the form of high energy phosphate bonds from the metabolism of glucose from the metabolism of palmate. And then it goes on to say how there is 2.4 times greater. It talks about the energy, the caloric value, 2.4 times greater than derived from glucose, albeit at a greater relative cost than oxygen. Hence, here it is. Hence, when oxygen is abundant and food is scarce, there is an advantage in utilizing fatty acids for fuel as opposed to using glucose. The reverse, however, would occur when food is plentiful and oxygen is scarce. So what does this mean? This basically means, guys, is that fat is a more powerful, better fuel source, period. But the problem with fat is it takes more oxygen per unit of energy, okay? Carbohydrates, the opposite. It's not as powerful of a fuel source. Again, if you're metabolically adapted to both, it's not as potent or powerful as a fuel source, but it's easier. It takes less oxygen for your body to use, which means what? It means if you're doing a sport or you're doing an endeavor, a passion, whatever, if you're doing something that you have limited oxygen, okay, you're better off running on carbohydrates. Why? Because you're going to get winded easier, okay, versus if you're doing, if you can breathe, if oxygen's not an issue, you're better off running on fats. And this is the big thing that I have found out. Like I said, when I would do my sets, if I do crazy squats, bench press, deadlift, whatever, you have it, and I go absolute failure, absolute muscular failure, do or die sets, I noticed that I was more winded after my set, and also it took me longer to recover for the next set on carnivore versus if I was running on glucose, on carbohydrates. So, this is the one big thing that I'm not seeing any carnivore advocates talk about this, and I'm not seeing any people who switch from carnivore, whether Paul Saladino or these other doctors or coaches or gurus, talking about this. So this is one big problem with the carnivore diet, okay? Are you going to be stronger? Are you going to be bigger, faster, stronger on the carnivore diet? Most likely. And again, this is an interesting note, is that what's the fastest animal in the world? The cheetah. Guess what it eats? Carnivore, okay? So it's not an issue of performance. The issue is that you're going to get winded easier, and that also you're going to get the recovery time between sets or between exercises is going to be greater. So if you're a football player, you run your 30 seconds, whatever the plays are, they're pretty short. It's not going to be a problem. If you're going to do, weight training like I do, not going to do a problem. However, you're going to have to rest longer between your sets to get all that CO2 out. So this is just something to think about. But guys, that's pretty much it. That's the big thing with carnivore. Seth Spartan, boom, stay safe, stay healthy. And we are out of here, and it's time to go eat some steak, baby. Yeah.